And so next, we're going to have James Boynton talk about his father, Jack Boynton. Jack was just one of the great forces bringing modernism to Texas, and I think Jim will talk a lot about that. James Boynton is a board-certified plastic surgeon based in Houston, specializing in aesthetic procedures for the breast, body, and face. He earned his Bachelor of Science from Duke and his Doctor of Medicine from the University of Texas Medical School at Houston. Dr. Boynton completed residencies in general surgery at Good Samaritan Regional and plastic surgery at St. Joseph Medical Center, both complemented by fellowships in microsurgery and hand surgery. An active member of the American Society of Plastic Surgeons and the Aesthetic Society, Dr. Boynton has been recognized as a regional top doctor by Castle Conley since 2011 and has appeared on the Texas Super Doctors list annually since 2012. His practice, Boynton Plastic Surgery, is dedicated to delivering personalized care, emphasizing patient safety and achieving natural-looking results. Dr. Boynton's artistic background, influenced by his father, renowned Texas artist Jack Boynton, informs his meticulous approach to plastic surgery, blending art and science to enhance our natural beauty. We welcome Dr. James Boynton.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you all for the opportunity to Cassetta, for allowing me a chance to talk about my dad on Father's Day. It's pretty special. Most of you probably knew my father, some may not. He went by, in his early career, by James Boynton. He went by Jack Boynton, which was a childhood nickname, sort of midway through his career. And if you look on, even the MoMA has two separate profiles for him. So he's sort of sometimes for archival work, it can be kind of hard to sort of put it all together. I've actually been on a 2-year archival quest to really know and understand my father better, and it's been probably therapeutic for me as well, and this is all stuff that happened before I was born. And most of it, my mom didn't know. It was before her time as well, and so my goal really, in the title of my talk, in Reframing Jack Boynton, is really to properly place him with his peers. He was a shy person. Well, he was modest and not sort of braggadocious and sort of, if that sort of makes sense. My hope is that he needs to have an eventual book publication, and I think a major publication is really what all this work that I've done and I've kind of started off, I hope that will attract more interest in going forward with that project. He was a true artist and truly ahead of his time, and now that we look at this 70 years later, a lot of the early works that I'll show you today, it's sort of like music, and you let enough time go by, you start to look at it in a different set of eyes, a new generation of eyes too. He was misunderstood by many, including his own parents, and I think that he found his home in his art group, which I'll talk about. I wanted to this is my title slide. The Dallas Turnpike is a well-known painting in the Museum of Fine Arts collection, 63 to 64, but I only recently found the topic of the painting. He rarely would sort of give you clues as what he was thinking about, but there was an old interview I found recently, in the last couple of weeks actually, and this was his emotional response to the JFK assassination. He actually did a sketch the day after this, which another Cassetta member actually has. And he was rarely literal, but you can almost make out a sort of a crosshairs, sorry about that, maybe, but what I think made this especially poignant to him was he had actually seen JFK the day before in the Houston motorcade, and so he had worked in downtown Houston, and so I think that made it especially sort of moving. And the Dallas Turnpike was the old thoroughfare between Dallas and Fort Worth, which is very close to where all this happened, so I thought that was fitting since we're here in Dallas today. This is sort of that iconic photo that I think of my dad. This is probably the 1970s, the full mustache. I wanted to share some stories, some fun stories too, but we were talking about Luis Jimenez yesterday. My childhood dog came from Luis Jimenez. In fact, we were at his ranch in New Mexico. I was probably 5 or 6, And his dog had a litter of puppies, and I got to pick out the one which came from Luis Jimenez. So just so many connections. He was a friend. We have some of his stuff as well. This is the only good video I found. I worked really hard on this. It's only 30 seconds, but I wanted to share it with you all.
Artist James Boynton created a larger canvas, an original painting for the freeway billboard. James Boynton on the purpose of art.
It's, again, the communication of an idea, or a feeling, or an emotional response. Again,
The larger
idea
canvas,
can be
5 Houston artists commissioned by Houston National Bank.
And I think that speaks to the emotion. He was communicating emotionally on the canvas, and that was maybe the biggest feature in his art. Was a start in the beginning. He was from Fort Worth, raised in Fort Worth and then in Dallas, and during World War II in 1943, his father took a job in Houston. He finished high school in Houston, and then he went back to TCU, where both of his parents had gone to TCU. This is some of the old memorabilia. This is actually, recently we figured out that this is actually Irv Harrison. They were in the same class at TCU. He was a sports car enthusiast. This was one of his early cars, and they had many adventures together, and both became, well-known Fort Worth artists, and they were both sort of founding together at TCU. These are some of the college era photos. This is probably coming back from a football game. This is the only time I've ever seen my dad so dapper in a double-breasted suit, but this would have been in that same time period. This is Samuel Ziegler. He was the first art professor at TCU. He actually started in 1917, but the expansion of the department really was post-World War II. So he was one of his main professors signed his certificates. Hal Lauderman, John Erickson, Leo Logan, the sculptor, and McKee Trotter came later, and they very heavily influenced and all sort of cross-pollinated together there at TCU. This is an iconic photo of my dad with his girlfriend at the time, Ann Williams, who was also an artist, and a childhood friend, and they're at the Mermaid Bar. He was a senior at TCU. In 1949 is when this photo was taken. This is an important slide. I want to spend a few minutes on this, and I heard my dad speak about Jackson Pollock making the cover of Life magazine in 1949, and from where he was at that time, interested in modern art, this was the pinnacle. This was the Michael Jordan of his specialty, if you will, and that was a big deal. He spoke about that, I heard once. This is a very important photo that I wanted to also talk about. 1951 was also in Life, but this is the group called the Irascibles. That's what they were known as. This is 15 of the 18 sort of artists that really defined what we call the New York School, or the abstract expressionism, and they were protesting against the Met, and they sort of came together and made this iconic photo, which was also January of '51 shown in Life magazine. And what I'll show you today is that from his career barely out of college, he showed with every one of these artists more than one time in most cases as a guy from Texas. This is his wedding photo to Ann Williams, 1950. They got married in De Leon, which is very close to Abilene. This is Convair, General Dynamics in Fort Worth, also known as the bomber plant. This was a large, sort of factory where they made the B-36, I'm told, and maybe even another airplane. But this is where in those days you had to have a job to support yourself, and this was his job from 1949 to 1955. He was a technical illustrator, essentially a draftsman, an engineering illustrator, but he had very tight precision with his drawing. I can remember him as a kid teaching me how to roll a pencil, and really very technical. And I think we see this in his art. Other Fort Worth artists that also worked there: Bob Cunningham, Dixon Reeder, David Brownlow, Kelly Fearing. This is actually an art piece that we have at my mom's that was from Bob Cunningham, but he still has the airplane theme, and he was I think he stayed there his entire career at Convair, from what I understand. This is just a picture of how large it was. This is the B-36. This is probably like the Tesla factory now. I mean, it's massive. This is the Charlie Williams studio, and this is sort of the ground zero of the Fort Worth Circle and modern, post-World II modern art in Fort Worth. and it's really worth spending a few minutes talking about. This was the first version of it. Charlie Williams and my dad met in the art department in 1949, but Charlie had been in World War II. He had lived in Paris and had been exposed to a lot of modern art. He brought those concepts back to Fort Worth. He was also 10 years older than my dad, and because my dad didn't have, his parents didn't really understand him in terms of his interest in art, this Charlie became like a father figure to my dad, or like even more than a big brother. I would say he was a father figure. And it became the social hub for all of the artists in the area for sharing of ideas, for just working with each other, the social gatherings, technical questions, just all of those sort of things. And I can't understate, we're fortunate to have some wonderful photos. Some of you may have seen these. All of these photos are archived at the Amon Carter. You can see here, this is Sandra Trotter, McKee Trotter's wife, my dad, Bill Bomar and Bror Utter having a cocktail probably on a Friday night, but talking about art, I'm sure. He was 100% art all the time. He couldn't turn it off. This was another photo. He's with his wife, Ann. You can see a Boynton in the background. That's Aerial Implements. And you can see Irv Harrison behind him. Another photo with that's Bob Cunningham. And this is Ann, who I was told was the life of the party. And it's a pretty wonderful expression on her face. These are also worth talking about. This is another Boynton. This is introspective landscape and aerial implements. Obviously, after probably an art opening or a party, he's talking again with Irv Harrison. Over here, my dad is in deep discussions with Dixon Reeder. You can see his wife, Ann, talking to Bror Utter. And back here, you can see McKee Trotter. They're all dressed up, the ladies in nice dresses, and probably after an art opening. And so, again, I wanted to share that. This is the earliest painting that I was able to find. It's actually in the collection, the original Whitty collection, which is now the San Antonio Museum of Art. And I had only seen one other religious motif painting, and he actually signs it vertically. So this is a pretty interesting painting, but this is a painting that is in San Antonio. This is the earliest show I was able to find. It was a local show from 1950 to 51. In those days, it rotated to the three cities, San Antonio, Houston, and Dallas. Each had one museum, the Dallas Museum of Fine Arts, the Whitty, and the Museum of Fine Arts. Some of the artists that were in that show, Bill Bomar, my father, Jerry Bywaters, Everett Spruce, McKee Trotter, Bror Utter. This was the painting that was in that show, variations on a city theme. We only have it in black and white. It was also shown in at the public library in Fort Worth, which was one of the sort of places that they showed art in those days. He was active in multiple media. He was active, this is the only stuff I've been able to find so far, but he was in the Texas Watercolor Society from the early 50s, which was put on by the Whitty. This was one in which he won a purchase prize in 1951. But my point in bringing this up is that he wasn't just a painter. He was doing watercolor. He was doing other illustrations, and he was sort of doing that from an early day. This is 51 at the Delgado, which is the original name of the New Orleans Museum of Art. This is 51, and so he was already getting outside of Texas in 51. He had two paintings that were selected for this show, and he had one watercolor. So in this show, he was in multiple categories already. This is Strata, which is one of those paintings that was in the show. Geological formations, a lot of the structure that was so common for those days. Well, in 1952, he was 2 years out of college, and there was a major show at the Knoedler, which had been open since the 1850s, and they wanted to do a show on Texas art, and so he was invited to that show. He's very proud of that. This is what the Knoedler looked like at that time. This is the exhibit cover, Texas Contemporary Artists, and this was kind of, this is what we're doing in Texas, and I'm just going to quickly go through some of those names. John Biggers, Bill Bomar, Boynton, Lowell Collins, Bob Cunningham, John Erickson, Otis Dozier, Kelly Fearing, Seymour Fogel, Joe Glasgow, Irv Harrison, DeForest Judd, Bill Lester. I know we talked a lot about Bill Lester yesterday, so I want to make sure that Riley Nail, Bob Prusser, Dixon Reeder, Buck Scheiwitz, Everett Spruce, McKee Trotter, Charles Umlauf, Brorutter, and Charlie Williams. Oh, and Dan Winger, I'm sorry. But this is the painting that was in that show. This is a Windmill Tree. It's a wonderful painting, and it's in the collection of the Old Jail Art Center, so I hope you have a chance to see it if you're ever out in Albany. But that same summer that he was showing in New York, he was also showing in San Francisco. The Texas Wildcat show was in San Francisco. A lot of the same artists. This is some of the press from the show, and this is Harbor from '52 that's also in the collection of the Old Jail Art Center. But this is another wonderful painting from '52. This is a shipping invoice that just sort of shows some of the artists, but Bill Bomar, Boynton, Dozier, Erickson, Lester, Nail, Reeder, Utter, Trotter. So that was '52. In '53, he was selected for a Colorado Springs Fine Arts. This is probably one of the first outposts in Colorado doing modern art at the Fine Arts Center in Colorado Springs. This is '53. Some of the artists that were selected: Forrest Bess, Bill Bomar, my dad, Otis Dozier. So we still have Dallas 9, John Erickson, Lester, and then this is the first of 4 times he showed with George O'Keeffe, Everett Spruce, Robert Prusser, and Umlauf. This is Introspective Landscape, which was in that show. I'm lucky to have this in my bedroom, and I get to look at it every day, but I wanted to make a point about this painting. It gets into structure and space and a lot of the detail that he was so sort of known for. But I heard him one time talk in there was actually one of the paintings in his thesis, he talks about a cross-section of a mountain, and it sort of reminds me of that. He was really playing with space. And he one time told me, he said, is it a painting or is it a window? And I think he really wanted it, a surface to be like a window into his world. And I think that's what he's sort of doing in this. What's also interesting is you can see in hand writing, we figured out the name of the painting, and in those days there was a price on it. It was $450, which I guess in 1952. But this is when paintings were for sale in the museum, and that's partly how these artists made a living. This was a major show in '52, 3 painters and a sculptor in Fort Worth at the Fort Worth Art Center. This is McKee Trotter, John Erickson, my dad, and then Charlie Williams. And this is a painting list here. Bird Trap is a wonderful painting, which was in that show. This is the Fine Arts Center as it sort of exists today. Aerial Implements was also in that show, and that's a wonderful painting to show from '52. This is a painting that I took from a slide scan and to give some sense of what it looked like. So it's called Alien Yellow, and I converted it from a slide scan to try to give some idea what it looked like. Pretty cool painting. This is a map that was shown in Mark White's essay Macrocosm, Microcosm, which Mark White didn't know my father, but he came across him from research. And basically, he drew a map here of abstract expressionism in the Southwest, going to Colorado Springs, Denver, Albuquerque, Taos, Fort Worth, Houston, New York, and San Francisco. And he pretty much identified my dad as the connector. And so I think he was a connector. He helped sort of spread these ideas. He had friends in all these places, and he was really getting outside of Texas. And this is the State Fair, 1953, right here in Dallas. This was a big deal. He won the purchase prize. I mean, we see another Dallas 9. Perry Nichols was in the show, McKee Trotter. He won the first purchase prize, and the Dallas Museum of Art purchased this painting. This is a wonderful painting. I hope that we can get back on the wall sometime. This is in the collection at the Dallas Museum of Art, limestone edge, and it's got a lot of the geological sort of formations and sort of edges and detail that were so typical for that time. This is another wonderful one. I think they show together. This is Solar Temple, which is in the Ted Weiner collection, but you can kind of see some of the same color schemes, the edges, a lot of the detail I think he probably got from that technical drawing that he was so good at. This is a one maybe some of you may not have seen. This is Arch, which is in San Antonio. It was in the original Whitty collection, which is now at the San Antonio Art League Museum. But and there's a feature in here that I think that this is the moon and the sun is from below, because he had a painting called The Sun is Under, and I think it's illuminating from below and it's giving that edge. He talks about that in one of his other paintings. This is one also that's similar to those other ones that I like a lot. Lighthouse, 1954. So back to Irv Harrison. He was the sports car enthusiast who there have been some stories about, they called them the midnight trips to Taos. And they would work a full day Friday and then basically drive 10 hours from Fort Worth to Taos. And he had the sports cars, and Irv would load up the car, and they would stay at the Sagebrush Inn. And I'm sure talk about art and congregate, but this is an Irv Harrison that we have at my mom's from '49. I just wanted to show that. But this sort of gets his footprint in Taos. The Galleria Escondida was a big deal in Taos, and this gallery was only open for 14 years, 1946 to 1960, and Miss Eulalia Emitaz was she was taking chances. She was doing things nobody was doing at the time. She started showing Diebenkorn, Ed Corbett, and Mick Chesney. They had left the California School of Fine Arts, come over to Taos from California. And what I was able to find is that Anne and my father showed up in 1953, just walked in the gallery, and they got to be friends, and he started showing with her. This is an old picture of Ed Corbett and Eulalia Emitaz. But he did a one-man show with in Taos at the Galleria Escondida. This is 1956. This is one of the paintings that was in that show. I got this again from a slide scan. It's called Green Structures. And they did a piece in Art in America on new talent in the USA, and this is 56. And it's a good read if anyone's interested, but the reason I showed this is that he writes that his dealer was the Galleria Escondida, which means it was very special to him. But he wasn't just in New Mexico. He was in Colorado. This is in the early 50s. I found these old photos. This is 54. You can see the timestamps. That's Independence Pass near Aspen. But this is 1954, and he's but the Denver Art Museum did a Western art exhibit every year, and he was in it 6 of the years of the 50s, 52, 54, 55, 6, 8, and 9. George O'Keeffe showed with him in 55. That's the second time. And I was able to get some of the, I'm not going to go through all the other names, a lot of the Fort Worth Circle and Dallas 9 artists in there as well. These are just some of the covers from those shows in the 50s. This was something we talked about last year, but this was a major show, the Biggers Boynton show at the MFA. This was 54, and you have to remember, he was not a Houston artist. He was a Fort Worth artist that was invited to Houston, and so this was sort of a historically important show for a couple of reasons. This is a list of some of the paintings that were in the show. This is Embered Verticals, which again is from a slide scan because to give some sense of the color that I wanted to show that was in that show. This was the press for that show in Fort Worth. This was the picture that was in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and that's Ann and my father. That's my sister Betsy when she was 1, and that's some of the press, I guess, if you will, for that show in Fort Worth. They were proud of their Fort Worth artist being shown in the big city in Houston. But maybe the biggest show, or one of the biggest shows, was the next year. This is the Guggenheim. That's James Johnson Sweeney. He was invited to be in the Younger American Painters show at the Guggenheim. This is 1954. This is a picture from Vogue magazine. Actually, Vogue did a piece on this. This is 54. You can see his painting Cove in the magazine. This is the way the Guggenheim looked at that time. They had not built the iconic structure that many think of as the Guggenheim. That came later, but this was the 50s. This is the exhibit catalog, but some of the artists that were in that show, William Baziotes from the New York School, and James Brooks with my dad, John Erickson, Jimmy Ernst, Richard Diebenkorn, Adolf Gottlieb, Franz Klein, William de Kooning, and this is one, Robert Motherwell, and this is Jackson Pollock. So he had achieved his goal. He showed with Jackson Pollock, and Jackson Pollock died in 56, so this is 54. He actually got to show with him twice, so I know that in some ways he never told me any of this. I'm assuming that he felt pretty good about that. But I don't think he went to his own show. He was very poor in those days, and he didn't travel to a lot of his own shows, which blows my mind, but that's really the truth. McKee Trotter, and this is Cove in color. It's a wonderful painting. This is Gaiad form, also from '52, and this may be the earliest version of one of his creature objects. Douglas McKagy had a term, he called them the later ones are more haunting. But this is one of the paintings he writes about in his, he got his master's at TCU in 1955, and basically what he did, he analyzed 5 paintings that he'd done 3 years earlier from '52. It's probably the best example of him writing about his own art and gives us a window into what he was thinking about. And so they do have a copy at the TCU library. There was one little paragraph I wanted to read, if I can read off this screen. Let me see if my slide, well, I can't read that far. So it's, basically, I'll try to describe what I'm talking about, but this is an off balance. He talks about compression forces and tensile forces. It's all very technical, which sounded weird for my dad. And he talks about this form being off balance and basically the way that he thinned these lines to give a sense of sort of the leaning and it's like the pull and the compression. I don't think it started out it didn't start from a sketch. I don't think he intended it to be a creature. It sort of evolved into that. But again, it's more thinking. Just knowing my dad, I never read anything like this, so I think it's pretty cool to read. Some other paintings that were in that show, Plumed Warrior from '52, which is a wonderful painting, and Burning Bush, also from '52. So we know where those 3 paintings are, and they were all in that in his thesis, and so we have some analysis on those paintings. This is the original Brightstock from '55. This is a sculpture by Charlie Williams called 8, and he's playing off that motif clearly in his art. So that sort of shows those connections as far as friends, artists, sharing ideas, all of that sort of stuff. But the more famous maybe Brightstock that we think about is the one at Amarillo, which showed in the Brussels World Fair. It also was shown at the Whitney. This is a wonderful painting. It's 80 inches tall. It's a big painting, and it's in the collection at the Amarillo Museum of Art. This is the other Brightstock, number 2, which is in the collection at the New Mexico Museum of Art in Santa Fe. Again, he still has some of those same themes. This was his first big one-man show at Fort Worth Arts Center in 1955. You can still see that motif even on the cover of his exhibit catalog. I'm just going to, there was a couple of lines by Jerry Bywaters that I wanted to read, and it may describe this period the best. And he said, "In every painting by Boynton, there is evident and reassuring reference to reality, the reality of nature or of man-made structures. Yet Boynton's inventive talents makes these realities vault beyond their origins to become new and individual verities." And again, I think that he sort of described these 50s paintings maybe better than anyone. And so we've gone through most of these. I'm just going to flip through this. This is a big catalog, a lot of the paintings that we've shown already. This is a list of the paintings. There's 37 paintings altogether. It must have been an amazing show. We have a couple more I'm going to show at the end. I'm just trying to click through this. This is Pinnacle, and again, I got this from a slide scan, so this is the only time I think we've seen color because those exhibit catalogs in those days were in black and white. So again, it gives that sense of the color to this painting. And this is Causeway, which is another wonderful one that I really enjoy. And Brightstock, this was the one that was in the show. That's the one I just showed you. And Structure and Eclipse was in that show, so we do have that in color. The D.D. Feldman show was also in '55. D.D. Feldman was a Dallas oil man that put together an idea to do the best 100 paintings in Texas. He had a major curator. They went and combed the lands and basically wanted to get 100 all of the same artists that we've talked about. Dallas 9, Fort Worth Circle. And I just thought it was kind of cool that we had the sort of the yearbook photos of these pictures. So I just wanted to show you guys. But all of these same sort of Texas artists, basically he had two entries. So he had 2 of the 100. So maybe it was biased, but he won first prize in that show against some pretty stiff talent, if you will. And it's a highly juried show. This is 1955. And I have this painting of D.D. Feldman congratulating a young Jack Boynton for winning his prize. I don't know where this painting is. I would love to see it if anybody knows. This is another painting that was, it's at the Blanton in Austin. This is 55. This is a primitive landscape. Mark White wrote about this painting in his essay, but it's a wonderful painting that I haven't gotten a chance to see this one in person either. This is Thunderstorm, which is we've talked about, and it's in the collection at the Museum of Fine Arts. It's famous for having this really low horizon line. He's playing with this lightning, and we think the big skies, it's probably either inspired by Amarillo or possibly New Mexico with the big skies because of where he was already going at that time. This was a major show I didn't know much about, but I've learned about. The Pittsburgh International. It was an international show at the Carnegie in 1955. It's a massive sort of exhibit catalog. They had a 97% rejection rate at this show from all of the selections, and some of the artists, they even sort of built almost like a tent to house all of this art. This is just some of the photos that I found, but from the United States, they had Baziotes, Diebenkorn, Ed Corbett, Ernst, Kelly Fearing, Gottlieb, Franz Klein, William and Elaine de Kooning, both of them, Motherwell. This is the second time he showed with Jackson Pollock, Andrew Wyeth, we talked about Wyeth yesterday, Bror Utter, and Dan Wingren, some other Texans in the show as well. In 56, this was the first of 5 shows at the MoMA, but this one in 56 was for drawing, it wasn't for painting. Some of the names I didn't recognize as much, but this was a submission for some of his works on paper, and I think that's, again, he was doing things in multiple media, and I think that's important to know. This is one of the works on paper that we have in the San Antonio collection at the Museum of Art. This is 59, and I would encourage everybody to go by Sarah Folt's booth after this. We've got a couple, if you're interested in works on paper, because we have some to look at, and I think it's pretty interesting. These are some other ones that I found, 58 and 59. A lot of them are shown in Chicago and New York and San Francisco, but almost anatomical details, and some of these are very tight sort of constructions. He started to add color in the 60s. This is a little bit of color. This was an engagement present to my mother. My mom told me that was her Christmas present that year. This is 64. And this is an early version, a sketch of a reductive landscape. This is probably about 66 when he did those massive paintings, but this was the only time I've ever seen a work on paper for that. But he even dabbled in sculpture. This is a piece that has been shown in Captive Audience from 1960, where he's being a bit playful but fun. He didn't do as much sculpture, but he did stuff in that as well. The University of Houston did a nice piece on him. I wanted to, and actually I have that one printed so I can read this one, but there's just a couple lines I wanted to read. And he says, to me, Boynton says, a successful painting is a combined emotional and intellectual statement of an individual. To date, a great deal has been done with a two-dimensional surface, to the extent that there are only left mostly minor variations of major ideas. Basically saying, we've already tried everything, which is often proves dead ends without any possibility for growth or enlargement. I don't feel, however, that the two-dimensional surface can be ignored, for it holds the key to whatever follows. In my own work, I have tried to emphasize space and structure, the infinite with the definite. This was another show put on by the MFA. It's called the Gulf Caribbean Show. A lot of international artists in this. You can kind of see there's Bill Lester in here and other Texas artists, but this one traveled to Boston, it traveled to New York, it traveled to Colorado, and I think it went back to Pittsburgh to the Carnegie. The reason I show this is who's who in art, in American art. In the 50s, he was shown in one category as a painter, and he's been in it, I think, every year since then. But the reason I'm showing this is that by the 70s, I think he was showing up in 2 categories. This is in painting and lithography. So again, they were recognizing that he had sort of skills in more than one area. This is the Whitney Museum of American Art in New York, Young America, 1957. This was a show I know he was very proud of. This is Brightstock that was in the show. There were 4 paintings in the show this was he was very proud of that, I know. But one of those, this wasn't in the show, this came later. The Whitney purchased Aftermath, and I think we looked at this yesterday, but I hope this image may have a little bit more detail. But and this, I'm not going to read this, but the Whitney has this in their collection, and he talks about how he added the sand to basically glue, and then he thinned it, and he did some other things, and I would almost promise that he had a consultant with Charlie Williams, because Charlie Williams was the technical consultant that everyone talked to and said, hey, how do you do this? And so I think there was and he used that theme in a lot of paintings. Pacemakers was a major show at the Contemporary Art Museum in Houston. I know that he was very proud of that. He was in 11 shows at the Contemporary. Aftermath was shown in this show, as well as Rain. You can see Rain back here. This is a previous building at the Contemporary Art Museum. And this is a picture of Rain, which is a wonderful painting. And you can see that three-dimensionality coming off the surface, and he's using that same technique with sand. But he had a footprint in Chicago, too. This isn't just, sort of New York, and now he's in Chicago. They did a big American exhibition at the Art Institute of Chicago in '57. He was in it again in '61. And he had his first one-man show at the Fairweather Hardin Gallery in '58. This is the poster for that show. And this is just a press piece from the Chicago newspapers about him. But this is the '62 Brooks. One of two times he showed with Calder, Bob Camblin, Ed Corbett, Diebencourt, Fogel, Louise Nevelson, and Richard Pousset d'Art, which was another one of those irascible paintings from that original group. This was the one from '64, which is an impressive list of artists to be shown with. And this is getting into the '60s, and he's still being shown with Avery Baziotes, Paul Brooks, Alexander Calder, Ed Corbett, William de Kooning, Helen Frankenthaler, George O'Keeffe for the third time, Glasgow, Gottlieb, Hans Hofmann. We talked about Hans Hofmann yesterday. Ed Hopper, Franz Klein, Jasper Johns. This is the only time I know that he showed with Jasper Johns. Robert Motherwell, Rauschenberg. Keep going. This is an iconic photo from his studio, 1959, that scarecrow, and this was sort of that, I think it's on Wikipedia, but it's an image that's often shown. This was done by his friend. He was not a motorcycle guy. I just thought it was a cool picture. But his friend was a photographer that took a lot of these photos at that time. This is Gothic, the original Gothic from 1955. This painting was in the personal collection of Bill Bomar. They were obviously friends, but they collected each other's art. And now it's at the collection of the Old Jail Art Center. The other Gothic is 56, and this is one that has been seen and shown some places. It uses that same sand technique as buildup on the surface that you can kind of see. Neon Study is a neat one from 56. This is Arid Structures from '56. You can see this is a slide scan. You can see that it's outside. This is a better picture of it. This is Inland Lights, another wonderful painting from '56. This is '57. This is the Museum of Fine Arts. This one used to be on the walls of the MFA when I was even in college, because I remember I used to go see it. I don't know, it's probably in storage now, but maybe with time we can get it shown again. This is a wonderful one, Sunstone, with that three-dimensional quality build-up. This was shown in San Francisco and in New York. A wonderful painting. This is Ambience from '57, another wonderful one in that time period. There Is No George Washington. This is one, very abstract, and he was playful with his titles when he did have titles, and I'm on a quest to figure out what he was talking about, but I haven't figured this one out yet, but it's still a pretty neat painting. This was a painting. This is a show that is called Islands Beyond. This was at basically Dominique Demenil built or funded and helped found the fine arts area to show art at the University of St. Thomas. This is well before they had an art department, but they had a place to show art. And so they had a curator. In this show, there was a lot of Mark Rothko, Clifford Still. My dad had some selections in this painting too, so this would be the time he showed with Rothko. Medusa from 1958. So Dominique Demenil hired Eve Arnold, who was a world-famous photographer in the late 50s. She was from Philadelphia. She shot Marilyn Monroe and all kinds of things. But basically, they did these photos, and he's in a cornfield or a pasture with some paintings, but it just gives some sort of interesting photos of my dad, and we know where some of these paintings are. That's Medusa that I just showed you, and this is him sort of relaxing in his studio. The Brussels World Fair, this is 58, 17 American artists were selected. This also showed in Copenhagen and several places in New York City and some other places. This was the brochure: Motherwell, Jimmy Ernst, Stephen Korn, Basiotes, Calcagno, Ellsworth Kelly. He had 3 paintings in this show. Rain was one of them, but this is Sun Trap, which is another one. This is at the Butler Institute in Ohio, and it was also in Vogue magazine. So he got in Vogue magazine with his art twice in 1 decade. I think that's pretty cool. I had to pay a lot of money for this image to Vogue, so I hope you guys enjoy it. This is the Fresh Paint Show of 58, put on by Stanford University. Susie Khalil told me this is where she got her font for the 85 show at the MFA, which sort of was borrowed over from this show. Two Texans were selected, Forrest Best and my father, and it also showed at the De Young in San Francisco, and this is Seance, which was in that show. He even showed in Havana, Cuba, and this has been hard to find information, and this is an active area of research, but the Lyceum and Lawn Tennis Center was a wonderful place. Pablo Picasso used to show here. This was a place that was a women's group, essentially, that built it, that believed in modern art. It had, all aspects of art, and I don't know who the other 3 artists were or what paintings were shown. There are some surviving records at the University of Miami, and right now I'm trying to work with them to see what we can find out. This is an exhibit from 50 when he was there, but we have not been able to get much more information. This is William Chrysler, and he did we talked about this also yesterday, the Provincetown Arts Festival, which is at the end of Cape Cod. This is their first in 1958, and David Addix was in the show. Eugene Bavinger, Hal Lauterman from here, Herb Mears, and Richard Stout. Eventually, he took his collection and built the Chrysler Museum, which is in Norfolk, Virginia. But in the 50s, it was still in tents in Provincetown. So this is a super cool. This is the Barone Gallery in New York City. This was his bio. It's no longer the Barone, but this is where it was. And that was like his probably biggest gallery in New York. At one time, he showed in 5 galleries in New York: the Knoedler, the Martha Jackson, the Barone, the Bowles, and the Stemfley. So again, these are some of those. Douglas McKay called them haunting insect creatures or creature objects. Creature objects is the term he used. This is a Blind Beast, which it's a very large painting, and I apologize for not having the scale on these paintings or the dimensions. This is Bird, which is another one, and I think they show well together. They also use the term action painting, or a lot of the way he did these strokes, I think, simulate motion. He also internally lighted some of these structures, and so that was sort of one of his hallmarks at the time. This is another one of those creature objects. You can see the light coming from inside. This is a 59, and this is Indian Uprising from 59. This was the cover of a book publication from the Barone Gallery, and this is the poster from that show. This is kind of a haunting one. This is the Apparition, 59. This is a long-standing painting in the Guggenheim collection from 50 years. I learned not too long ago that it was deaccessioned during COVID. I don't know where the painting is at this time, but I'd like to see it if anybody knows. This is a 59. He was still playing with lightning, the lightning bolts. This is Volcano, which is a small painting, but you can see the lightning here again, the internal light. These are 2 important Parisian French art magazines that the publication's no longer in print. This is 58 and this is 59. And so they basically sent their art critics into America to sort of do a tour all through the US, and they really were struck by Houston, of all places, in New York. They talked about Philip Johnson architecture at St. Thomas, and the only 2 artists they mentioned were Jim Love and my dad, and they were best friends. So I think that's pretty cool. This is the Wadsworth Atheneum. It's a pretty amazing building. I'm told it's the oldest public art museum in America from the 1840s, and he has a painting in their permanent collection called Omen from 59. This is the Corcoran, which was another major outpost for modern art in Washington, D.C., and this was their exhibition in '59. Albers, Milton Avery, Gottlieb, Hans Hofmann again, Diebenkorn. This is the fourth time with George O'Keeffe, Rauschenberg, Pute Dart, Hedda Stern, who was the only woman in that Erascables photo. He showed with her twice. And these are 5 of the galleries that lended to this show, all of which he showed at. I thought was cool. This was the show, the first time 3 Texans was showed in Paris, Boynton, Maxwell, and Wingren. And this was put together by Meredith Long in '59. It showed at the Galerie de Colisée, which I'm told that there was a wonderful picture of a cowboy on a white horse the night that's opened in Paris. And there is a photo somewhere, and if we're trying to find that photo. And this is the poster from that show. This is actually descriptions of all the paintings. He had 13 paintings in this show, and this is all in French, and I've had this translated, and it's been kind of fun. This is one of those shows, one of the paintings, Snow Grill from '56. And this other painting that we have been able to identify that was in that show is called Endgame, which is at the Fort Worth Modern. And they have 11 of my dad's paintings at the Fort Worth Modern, and I'd like to try to get those shown at some point as well. They're wonderful to show. This is another one here at the Dallas Museum of Art. This is a painting from 1960. Again, that action painting. Douglas McKagy talks about this painting, and it's actually on loan at the Southwestern Medical School at least it was the last time I saw it, because that's me 30 years ago. And it's a good story. I was actually there for a medical conference, and I looked over and I said, that looks like something my dad might have done. And all my doctor friends said, that's not your dad. There's no way. And I went over and looked, and sure enough, it said his name, and it said, on loan from Dallas Museum of Art. So I sent it to the chairman, and I didn't get a response. So they're not that interested in art. So I would love to see that back in a museum, but I'm glad it's somewhere. This is a wonderful painting called Rainbow Eater, one of my favorites. That showed at the Stemfly in New York. Another one of those creature sort of object paintings. This is one that's neat called Reflections. You can see the internal light, some of these edges this is a 59 also shown at the Stemfly. This is a wonderful painting called Dissection from '61. It's a very large painting, but a lot of detail work. I don't know if all of that's going to show up on these slides, but one to see in person, and we could make that happen if anybody wants to see that painting. This is Bull Moose from '63. A neat painting, another one I like a lot. This is the next time he showed at the MoMA. This is now '62. This is on the figure. And so he was, again, I'm not going to keep reading artists, but this was the scarecrow that you can see this on the MoMA page. This was the painting that was in that show. This is the MoMA's website. He was in 5 shows there. These are some wonderful paintings at the Fred Jones in Oklahoma. This is, they called him SF, or for San Francisco, because he lived in San Francisco from '60 to '62. And they're just numbered paintings, number 18, number whatever. And so they were all paintings that he did during his sort of time living in San Francisco. This is a wonderful landscape he did, and he did a series in the '70s. It won a prize. This is at the New Orleans Museum of Art. I just love this photo because he's standing next to his painting, and this is a cool one. This is a really amazing one. This is one of those reductive landscapes this is in the Amarillo Museum of Art collection called Night Watch. Another one that sort of had that theme. This is in the New Orleans Museum, Top of the Beanstalk. And this one is here in Dallas, and it's at the community college. They call it Mountain View College. I have not had a chance to see this painting, but I'm told it's on the walls, so I hope we can figure out where this painting is, because it's a large one, and I think it's worth seeing. Tamaran was a big part of his career. I'm going to just briefly mention a few things about Tamaran. At the advice of James Johnson Sweeney in the late 60s, he did a fellowship at Tamaran, which was a lithography school, essentially, and a lot of famous artists all went, and this is in '67. He spent an entire summer, and I actually got called about 5 years ago to make a movie. They wanted to make a movie about the Tamaran artist. It was a big deal, and I didn't really know much about it. They actually have a full book on the MoMA website. It was shown at one of the MoMA shows. This is a showing of some of those Tamaran prints that he did that summer in '67. I will say the Amon Carter has a full set of the Tamarind prints. The MoMA has a full set. The LACMA, the LA County Museum of Art, and the Norton Simon, which is in Pasadena. Those are the 4 museums that I know, but I think that we should show those as well. I keep talking about the art that he was showing, but he was also a teacher. It was a big part of what he did. And so really, he taught at the University of Houston in 55 to 57. That's he and Earl Staley teaching probably in the early 70s at St. Thomas. He taught at the San Francisco Art Institute, which was formerly the California School of Fine Arts from 60 to 62. One of his students was Jerry Garcia, which is a cool story. There was a jazz band at the Art Institute. It was part of the Art Institute. And all I remember my dad saying is he wasn't a very good artist, but obviously his talents were in other places. He taught at the University of New Mexico in 63. He did the Tamarind Fellowship in 67. And he started the art department at St. Thomas. And he was the chairman, and he was there from 69 to 85 until at that time, the university got rid of the art department, which is sort of what ended that. He helped start the Anderson Ranch, which is in Snowmass, Colorado in the early 80s. And he was an informative influence in the Glassell in Houston as well. That is my dad, and Julian Schnabel, who is another one of his students who, and he had students that would he became famous, and he was from, this is him with his surfboard that says Julian. This is in their New York, I guess his studio, if you will. And my dad was always proud of his students, and he didn't have an ego about anything. And actually, this is a portrait he did of my dad. We have a couple of Julians at my mom's house, but this is one that he did a picture of my dad. I thought it was kind of fun to show. This is what I remember in my childhood. This would be my dad in the 70s in his very junky studio on Welch Street. The reason he doesn't have a shirt on is because there was no air conditioning here. His brain was a little jumbled up and messy, but that's just the way he was. And this is, lots of people visited this. In fact, a lot of famous people would come to this studio, and it was so junky. I thought that the support, it really looked so dilapidated, you almost wondered if the floor was going to fall in. He taught me how to stretch paintings this summer, and that's where, when I was in high school, I used to ride my bike over there, and that's a fun memory. One other memory I'll share real quick about Mark Rothko. If you ever see apologies to M. Rothko in his art, the reason is that in 57, when they did the Rothko show in Houston at the Contemporary Art Museum, they hired Jim Love and my dad to unstretch and stretch the paintings because they didn't have FedEx in those days. And so they went to the Houston Ballet, and these were massive color-filled paintings. And so he always said that one of them was kind of worn out, and so they tore one of them. And Rothko filed an insurance claim, and so it all worked out, it's fine. But so he always would say apologies to Mark Rothko because they tore one of his paintings. That's a true story. This is a picture of my mom and my dad. This is on a field trip taking art students to New York on a bus. And this is probably 65. A friend of mine sent me this from an auction, and I think it was in the newspaper, but it's a pretty neat photo I wanted to share. These are other photos that I got from the newspaper, essentially. But this is, I don't know what show. That's my mom. That's my dad. He's got the lit cigarette. This is the 60s, but really a cool photo. A little bit later, that's a painting called American Dream. You can see them. This is another sort of fun photo. This is the last one I'll show here. That's he and Jim Love looking at a Motherwell painting. And that's Mrs. Masterson, who was one of the benefactors of this show. This is the old Contemporary Art Museum, and they're gazing at a Motherwell. This is a painting that I want to just 2 seconds. It's called The Curse of an Aching Heart. And his first wife died in 64. And again, we talked about emotion on the canvas, and I think that's what this subject of this painting is. And he was still in some people call it his darker period. But this is 65, and this is Scarlet Ribbons, and the year he married my mom. And so his canvas got brighter, and you see that reflection in his art. This is sort of the modern art of Houston. You got Dorothy Hood, Richard Stout, my dad. This is Bill Anzalone and David Hickman. But this was that video that I showed you. This was part of that Houston 5 artists thing. There was once a story, it's an audio interview, you can find it on the internet. I think They said if Dick Ray, Jim Love, Dorothy, my dad, and Richard Stout were in a car accident, you would have taken out modern art in Houston in one car accident. So that was sort of it. He was honored at the White House. This is in the 70s. This is the boot print. That's Mrs. Mondale, the vice president's wife at the time. That was that iconic boot print that many have seen. And I wanted to tell James Searles, there is a Searles, his piece is right in the center of that. So obviously he thought very highly of James, and it was a big part of his work. This is from the retrospective show in Amarillo Museum of Art. This is 1980. It's the only retrospective that's really been done, and it was I was 8 years old. I got to help hang the show. And that's my dad and Jim Love, sort of together at sort of their later years. And one of the things I wanted to say, connecting back to Charlie Williams, my dad, so Jim Love did theater sets at Baylor. He had a technical background, and he didn't know a lot about sculpture, and he was having some problems, and my dad said, well, I have a good friend, Charlie Williams, that I'll introduce you to. And basically his whole, everything, the lost objects, all of that sort of started from that friendship. So they were a trio. And they were almost like two sons to Charlie. And you can see this in the archives. You can see it in interviews. They would call him with technical questions. And I can't emphasize that enough. And I think someday that would be a great show to have of Jim Love, my dad, and Charlie Williams all together, because you got to know the backstory and know how they were all sort of related. That's my mom and my dad. That's me and my dad. That's me, my dad, and my grandfather. He was an attorney and did not really understand art at all, but and that's another reason that Charlie Williams was such a big part of my dad's life. And this is the last one I'll show. This is he got to meet my girls. He passed away when they were 18 months old, and this is at the church in Houston that my grandfather had a lot to do with, and he had did this art piece for the church. But I'm so thankful that he got to meet my girls. Anyway, thank you very much, and I want to thank you. Thank you. I want to special mention just three people that really I couldn't have done this without. And Carl Williams is he pointed me when my compass was going the wrong direction. He helped me. It was so wonderful. Scott Barker was wonderful, and Christian Kelleher as well, who helped point me in the right direction when I was having some problems with the archives. Mark Keever for supporting us as well. It's so wonderful. So thank you all.